All right, let's unpack these developments now with Donovan Williams, a social commentator and a Mail and Guardian op-ed columnist. A very good afternoon to you, Donovan, and Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year to you as well, Lunati, and to all your viewers.
All right, let's start then with the India-Africa relations. I mean, the India and South Africa, if you look at that relationship first, has maintained a steady and strategic partnership for some time. I mean, we witnessed that even during the G20 Leaders Summit when India was standing firm with South Africa on issues that are more important to the country, like multilateral reform, equity, etc. But talk to us about how India is positioning itself seemingly more aggressively on the African continent, and what do you think is driving this momentum?
Yes, there's a lot of things to unpack in this. Yeah. India historically has been in economies in Africa that were tied to the British because of the common colonizer in Britain, but now recently, with West Africa, in particular Nigeria, with Dangote and his investment in the petrochemicals industry, particularly refinery, he has looked at India to get engineers within the petrochemicals industry. The result of that is that the overwhelming majority of engineers have been Indian, that he has imported into Nigeria. And India historically has not necessarily had investments or business relationships that strong with West Africa. South Africa, of course, has the largest population of people of Indian origin outside of India. So that and also has been part of the struggle. We know the stories of Gandhi in our struggle and so forth. And so there's always been a political relationship, social relationship, and cultural exchange. That has grown further with IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, and then, of course, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And so that relationship has always grown. And as we saw, it came to the fore in the G20. The result of that is that even though when India changed government, where you had the BJP, which was not the Indian Congress, and South Africa has been led ostensibly by the African National Congress, and the African National Congress and the Indian Congress has had a strong relationship. Historically, you would have thought it could have been rockier because the BJP and the Indian Congress are very, very different politically. But that has not scuppered the relationship. South African and Indian relationships have grown from strength to strength. So even when you've had problems, like in particular in the ICC, the International Cricket Council, and so forth, it has not managed to derail the relationship. It has grown stronger, as we saw with the G20. And there we must really commend President Ramaphosa and his team. What they managed to get out of the G20 is very, very essential. Yeah. Now, with India itself, and it's going past 100 billion just a couple of months ago, 2 to 3 months ago, $100 billion worth of trade in Africa. It means that, as we have seen, where the United States, even during Biden's time, where they have weaponized trade, weaponized the dollar, weaponized tariffs and so forth, that you need alternatives to Western trade. And that alternatives to Western trade can't only be China, can't only be to a degree Russia. It also has to be countries like India. It depends now, though, that how does that trade occur? Is it just extractive? Is it just hiring engineers? Or is it real capacity building? Is it real exchange? And for that to occur, Africa as a whole and countries within Africa need to work to complement each other, as opposed to just trying to see which deal can they best get for the individual countries with a country like India. And we hope that that can be able to come out through it. Because this is an exciting time because it provides alternatives, but how you do it with India and how you do it with China and so forth becomes important.
And I mean, that was going to be my question in terms of, we know that because African countries face these higher tariffs and these tougher trade barriers in the United States and parts of Europe, countries are now looking for new markets. I mean, how does India's engagement differ from China's long-standing presence in Africa was going to be that question. And what should governments, more importantly, be most cautious about as they deepen these ties with especially India?
It has to be exchange. In other words, even if you get the engineers, say like in Nigeria in the refinery, if you get those Indian engineers, part of the deal must be they must train local Nigerians to become as good as engineers. Similarly with technology, if Starlink comes, there's nothing wrong with getting the alternative from China as well as the Indian alternative in technology, but in such a way that you get both local partners and not just empowerment partners, but actual technology exchange, so you can create your own local technology solutions. If you do not do that, as Africans, if we do not do that, then we run the risk of remaining dependent, that anybody can weaponize that or pull it away from you when you want to, and when they wish to, if you do not do what they require. And that has been ostensibly, since in the independence of countries in Africa, that has been the difficulty Africa has had ever since independence. It has not been able to create durable solutions because it becomes solutions dependent on external countries and countries out of the continent and countries acting on their own behalf and not necessarily Africa's interest.
That said, and before we go into the Middle East, that said, in terms of, your concerns, does the continent, though, finally have more negotiating power, do you think? Or are the structural, inequalities still somehow limiting that leverage?
The leverage of the continent is not dependent on the structural inequalities. The leverage is dependent on the cooperation within Africa, because Africa doesn't negotiate as one continent. Yeah. They should complement each other. But what we see more and more in multilateral forums, African countries end up negotiating bilaterally. So the manner in which South Africa in particular, and that's why I said we must commend President Ramaphosa, has managed to bring in countries within the continent, both in the region and outside the region, and say, can we talk about what is our stance going to be in BRICS, even if you're not a part of BRICS? Can we talk about what our stance must be in the forum with China and Africa, FOCAC, and so forth? So it depends how we can complement each other. We haven't been able to do it in the WTO, the World Trade Organization. We haven't been able to do it on the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs. So we always end up doing bilateral. So it means a lot of political work from the side of both our Department of International Relations, the president, led by the presidency, and trade and industry, to make certain that we complement each other as Africans. Otherwise, we won't use the leverage. If it's not about structural inequalities, it's about us cooperating and being united as Africans. And it can be done, but it requires a levels of trust.
Yeah. Let's turn then our focus to the Middle East, particularly Israel. We saw yesterday how the Israeli government got rid of or is proposing to expel some humanitarian organizations. And now we are discussing this proposal by Israel of building a new prison for Palestinian detainees surrounded by crocodiles. This has drawn criticism from human rights organizations. What do you make of this?
Yeah, Israel is becoming that which they claim was done to them, sadly. I think all of us need to feel sorry for Israel because it's real projection and transferring. What they fear, they are becoming. As South Africans, we know what it means when you deal with a Nazi authoritarian regime which doesn't regard you as human beings, and therefore you don't have rights. You have detention without trial. You have people treated like they do not have human rights because you don't regard them as humans. Israel has had a scandal with crocodiles, actually, and alligators, and that they've had a scandal that they were culling them, and now they want to create a prison surrounding with crocodiles. It's because the people they are putting them in that prison, they don't regard as human. So that's why human rights doesn't feature. B'Tselem is quite correct. Israel looks for every solution except for justice and peace. But more than that is this as well, is that Israel is actually saying that by having prisoners getting released, it creates a motivation for escape. It's so illogical. It means when you do the fair and just thing, then you actually create insecurity. It shows that Israel has not just lost the plot. It really doesn't think of Palestinians as human beings. And that is sad, because every human being is a human being, regardless of their culture, religion, or nationality. And Israel the Israelis, more than their government, need to look at themselves to ask, what are they becoming? Because I'm sure they should not want to become a people like this. And this prison idea and having alligators or crocodiles and so forth actually shows the nadir, the depths of that Israel has sunk to, and Israelis need to really look at themselves carefully.
Donovan, I would have loved to engage you on Zoran Mamdani, but we have run out of time. But thank you so much for your time and your analysis. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Nati, and have a great 2026. I know it's going to be a great year.
Absolutely.